Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to the Lost in Translation show, where we explore the past to help people understand what's happening in the world today. Over the last several months, we've been focusing on the reality of communism. Our goal is to dispel the myths of authoritarian regimes' propaganda and educate the West about the realities of this bloodthirsty political movement. Contrary to Western and Chinese propaganda, Chinese industry and population is in complete collapse. Major cities and ports are empty, 99% of foreign companies have left, and an unexplained disappearance of over half the population is confusing the remaining population. What's really going on in China? Why does Western education promote this concept when it has cost the mass slaughter of tens of millions, regardless of the slave state working and living conditions these people suffer? What does communism do to our minds? Why are Western leaders so focused on bringing down their own nations and implementing communism everywhere? Before we get started, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This really helps me out. And if you'd like to support my channel, my Venmo and Zelle accounts are listed in the comments section below. Thank you for your support. So to help us understand the true history of China is Kay Rubicek. Her family escaped communism in both China and Russia. She's a world traveler, author, musician, and filmmaker, but most of all, she's a survivor. Her insight into the everyday lives of the Chinese people and their struggles can help the West understand the true outcome of the bloodiest political movement in modern history, where people are disposable and half the country has been left behind to temporarily lift the other half out of poverty. Chaos has erupted. The system favors the party members while enslaving the rest of the population in factories. Welcome, Kay.
Thank you, Simone. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. You have such a vast and interesting life experience. Um, I kind of wanted to play a clip from one of your movies just to get us started and show people how interesting the movies you are and how you really do a wonderful job showing people what's really going on in China today.
All right, that sounds great.
So let me see if I can do a screen share here. Here we are. We'll just go ahead and start the trailer. This is Finding Courage. It's available online if you'd like to watch the movie, rent it, or purchase it.
There's an old Chinese saying my ancestors learned before the Communist Party took over our country. The family is the essential unit of human society, and that you must have honor and defend your family. But it's not always easy to do.
When the regime gives the order, you have to kill.
My heart was pounding. I felt my body bouncing and twisting on the floor. They put numbers on our shoulders and separated us into rows of even and odd numbers. I was number 9. My brother, he's still in prison. And my sister, she was sent to a labor camp without a trial. But there's one piece of evidence they haven't been able to destroy yet. I left everything behind. If I can't expose what they did to us, then all of our suffering would be for nothing.
Very powerful ad. I hope people go and watch it.
Thank you. that took us quite a few years to make that movie. It's a true story. When people hear the story, they say to me, how can that be true? Everything is true. We spent 6 years making sure everything was true because the original story was just too hard to believe. And the fact that so it's about a family that is, half of them escaped China, the other half are still in China. And one of them, a sister, her remains, she was killed in a slave labor prison camp. Her remains are still with the camp. And the family is trying to get justice for not only for her murder, but to get some closure, to get the body back. So we were able to get undercover footage inside the slave labor prison camp with admissions from the camp director saying, yeah, we've got the body. You want it? Sign here and say that she died of natural causes, which meant they had to lie to get what they wanted. So I won't tell you what happens in the movie, but this was a real climax in the story because this happened while we were, this was all unfolding. So much of it was unfolding while we were filming and documenting the story and getting access to the footage. And it was, the family had put a lot on the line to tell this story and they're risking life and death really of their family members in China. So it was quite amazing, not only to get access to be out, but to know that they were brave enough. I didn't want to put this out. I said, I'm worried for you. And they said, we want to tell this story. So that's why we called it Finding Courage, because their courage really gave me a lot of courage to be able to put this out.
Yeah. Has their family received any backlash in China?
Oh, absolutely. They have since day one. It's been about 18 years now since she was murdered. The body is still in the morgue, and they have been tracking it on a monthly basis, sometimes weekly basis. And they faced every threat you can imagine, from one of their nephews being kidnapped from school, taken by police to a camp, and being held there until the parents came and trying to coerce the parents to sign papers to get the body cremated and have everything covered up and closed. So they've gone to that extent of kidnapping. He was 8 years old at the time when he was kidnapped. So that's the kind of, they've gone to the movie goes into all the situations that they had to face, but that one to me was the most extreme. So I had to verify it. We got footage of the school that he was taken from. I needed proof from the labor camp to show that her body was there, that she was detained, that she was murdered there. I found people who were in the same camp with her at the same time, and I interviewed them to verify the story. So when I put a story out as a documentary, especially when it comes to China, I think you have to be really sensitive because people get completely different views depending on which media they read or watch. So I wanted this story to speak to anybody so that they could look at it and be like, how did that happen? And then I answer it. And how could this be possible? Well, we've checked off everything. And so the movie's received, wonderful awards and accolades, and it's been quite a hot topic for some festivals. They've said it was too hot, they wouldn't take it, because many film festivals get money from China, and they were afraid to screen this film because they felt that it could risk their funding. Other film festivals said to us, one in particular said, we normally get $100,000 funding from China every year. This year, the year our movie came out, they didn't take the money, and we won a gold prize. So we've seen a lot of people stepping up with their courage from this too, which is really inspiring.
Well, why did they murder her? I mean, why is it such a secret? It's no secret they murdered tens of millions of other people. I don't want to give away the movie, but the other people still just seem to be alive. So was she rebellious?
Well, yes, in a way, in the system inside China, if you speak your mind, if you want to have what we take for granted, things we take for granted. Here, we learn about human rights in school. We learn about all different kind of rights and the ability to express oneself, and what is oppression, what is freedom. We learn these things from kindergarten. In China, they don't. They do not learn what are human rights. And when the government in China, which is not a government how we see it, where you have parties who kind of vie for political power, people vote them in and out. In China, it's not. It's a one-party state. Very, very different. So I prefer to say regime because it is a one-party state. It's really not a government. Government gives it, in our minds, it makes us think that it's equivalent to what we have when it's entirely not. So when we look at the regime there, this woman, she held a banner on Tiananmen Square. And it's funny, not funny. I did the same thing. I held a banner on Tiananmen Square as a human rights advocate in 2001. The woman in this movie, she did the same thing a few months before me. And she was calling for an end to the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in China. I did the same thing, but I'm not Chinese. I don't have a Chinese passport. And I was released. I was kept in a prison for 23 hours. But this woman, she was sent to a labor camp because she did the exact same thing as me. We both broke no laws. Just holding a banner in a public space. I was holding the word compassion. Compassion. She did the same thing. Truth, compassion, forbearance. She held those three principles. But those things are illegal in China. And it sounds crazy to say that you could be arrested for holding the word compassion in a public place on Tiananmen Square in China. But this is the world of China that we don't see in our media typically because it's hard to unpack. So we get the headlines that are easier to understand, like GDP goes up, GDP goes down, kind of simpler things, oh, trade tariffs, all these things going on. And we say, oh, yeah, we can understand that. But to hear, woman is arrested or killed for holding a banner on Tiananmen Square, we say, that doesn't make sense. We won't report that. It's too hard. So I try to tell these stories that are too hard in a way that make it easy for people to understand. So it's hard to sum it up in a few words to say, yes, the Chinese regime arrested this woman for holding the word compassion on Tiananmen Square, and then they later killed her because she refused to sign papers saying that she would never do that again and that she would give up her belief. So that's the reality of China, and that's why she was killed. Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey? Because you just didn't randomly come to these opinions. You've lived this, you've seen it, your family's lived this. One of the things that's difficult to dispel is this massive Chinese propaganda. And for instance, you mentioned how they infiltrate our movie industry. They definitely do. And so I want you to explain from your perception and experience how it works really and what they did to your family and communism has affected your life.
It has. And so my family escaped first Russia in the 1920s. My great-grandparents on both sides of my family, actually, mother's and father's side, both escaped. They didn't know each other at the time, but they were, two families out of millions that had to escape or face the gulags or instant death under Stalin and Lenin, under communism. My father's family spent 5 years by foot traveling from one side of Russia down through Mongolia and eventually found refuge in China and northeast China, where my father was born and raised and lived for 14 years. He then had to escape with his family. This was during the Great Famine. They call it great around the world, we call it great. It's a euphemism that we've been given from the Chinese regime. It's not great in any positive way. It's great only in terms of size. 45 million people were killed during that Great Famine. That's a lot of human beings, 45 million. Like how many states is that have just been wiped out in terms of the size of population? That's what happened in the 1950s. And that's when my father was lucky enough to escape and he went to Australia. And my mother's family, they left a little bit earlier. They were in Shanghai. They missed the famine altogether, thank goodness. And they met and fell in love, got married, had 4 kids. I'm one of them. And I grew up in Sydney, Australia. But my family didn't talk about communism because they had found freedom. And they didn't want to talk about the evils of it because it is so hard to imagine and painful to remember when you finally come to a place like America or a place like Australia, and you have freedom of belief, you have freedom of choice, freedom of religion, freedom to work, freedom to build a business, even if you're at whatever level you're at, you're allowed to start a business. You can't do those things under communism. So my family got to work. My dad learned English, and he just got into his studies, and they worked hard, and they built themselves a life. They didn't want to tell us about communism. My grandmother used to tell me a little bit because she was very religious, very pious woman, and I learned so much from her. And she would warn me of communism, but I had troubles understanding her because she only spoke Russian and my Russian was limited. So when I told my dad I was going to go to China as a human rights advocate and I was going to stand up for the people who were being persecuted in China for practicing the Falun Gong spiritual practice, which is like Tai Chi, looks like yoga, stretching, and it's a very sort of ancient Buddhist practice. And I had done this meditation for years, and it had helped me personally so much with my health and wellness. And I thought, how can they kill people for this? It's unbelievable. I needed to see it for myself. I said, I'm going to go and do something about it. My dad said, you're completely ignorant and you don't know what you're doing. He was right. I was 100%. I did not know because I just couldn't believe that they could kill people for such a benign thing, something that I had been doing. It's like trying to stop someone from running, jogging in the park or doing yoga. It didn't make sense to me. I did it anyway because I'm usually a stubborn person and I'm curious, I'm an adventurer, and I landed myself in prison for holding that banner on Tiananmen Square. And fortunately, I figured I didn't expect they would kill me or torture me too much because I had an Australian passport. I felt I had protection, which I did, thankfully. I was naive, but it really opened my eyes to what a regime can do. When they told me, I said, what laws did I break? And they said, truth, compassion, and forbearance is illegal in China. You held the word compassion in public. That is illegal. They could not show me any law, but this was an unstated law. And that's that was how I came to learn communism. Then I started to find out my family's history and dig more into it, all the things that I hadn't been told. And then I decided to turn my filmmaking and production skills, which I had already been doing professionally for years prior to me going to China. I decided to use those skills to tell some of these stories that I felt the other media were not telling, because as I found out, many of the media and Hollywood, they receive a lot of funding from China. They want access to the Chinese market. I get it. This is business, right? And many of them have separated the people and human rights, and they focus only on the money, and they follow the people in power and just take whatever they're told. They're told, oh, these people did something bad, or they're addicts or something like that. They'll use some label to just completely dismiss these people that are in labor camps. And we're talking about millions of people in labor camps. We're not talking about the lady in our film is one woman, but she is representative of so many that have been murdered by the regime and targeted in different campaigns throughout the last 70 years of the Chinese Communist Party. So bringing it up to now and how I've seen how this works is when I was making that movie, Finding Courage, it's about the family. But the family couldn't answer the questions that I had as a journalist, where I'm like, I need to know, how could they torture you? How could they arrest you? How could they do this? And they said, well, this is China. This is what we know. And I said, well, that's not enough for me. It's not enough for my audience. It's not enough for Americans. We will not understand that. So I said, I need more. So we took longer to make the film because I wanted it to answer these questions. So I said I needed to find the perpetrators and interview them. People who actually they used electric batons on innocent prisoners of conscience inside prisons, labor camps, and detention centers. I interviewed a man who ran multiple slave labor prison camps, not just one, multiple. And I interviewed a man who worked in the propaganda department of the Chinese Communist Party, another one who wrote speeches for high-level Chinese officials, another one that was a former police chief in Beijing during the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, where 10,000 students were murdered on the square by tanks and soldiers. So I was able to understand their perspective. What they told me was shocking, but it took me into that world and then I realized I needed to be a bridge to help people look into the world of China that we don't see in the headlines. It's what the people really experience, and what the officials under the regime are required to do to maintain their workplace, to maintain their livelihood, and what they are willing to betray in terms of their own conscience and their hearts as human beings. And so that's what I explore. In the movie, there's only a few minutes of that because it's really all about the family. But I do bring those guys in, and then so many people said, I want to know more about these guys that you bring in this movie. And eventually I said, okay, I'll turn it into a book. So I do have a book that you can find on my website. And it's called Who Are China's Walking Dead? I've got it here. You can get this as an ebook or an audio book. And it's got the interviews with these guys, but it's through my eyes of learning what they went through, and me understanding it, because some of the things they said were quite extreme, and they don't make sense when you just hear it. That's why it doesn't make a good headline on the 6 o'clock evening news. It's too hard for American media to unpack it. So we need to do it. We need shows like yours and books and films and things to help people use their brains and say, what's really going on in China? It's a very different world. And so I hope I've answered your question. That's kind of what brought me to where I am today.
Excellent. So what are the most common misunderstandings that you think that the Western people have about China?
One is that what I mentioned earlier, that the government of China is equivalent to, say, the government of America. We think that in America, we have a constitution, and in China, they have a constitution. And we have rule of law here. You can sue people. You can go through the federal court, the local court, the Supreme Court. And then they look at China and they say, oh, there's a court system there too. Okay. And they start to think that it's equivalent because the names are very similar. So communist regimes use language in a very propagandistic way to trick people. So they'll say, we have courts, we have a constitution, we're just like you. You have to get beyond the surface. And so I think this is the two biggest things. One is the government and rule of law. When you look at China, there is a constitution for the government of China. There is a government of China, and that language is used, and it makes us put down our guard and say, they've got a government. When you read the constitution for the government of China, and I break this down in my book, it is beholden to the constitution of the Chinese Communist Party. There is a constitution for the Chinese Communist Party, and that puts money and economic growth above all else, including human beings. So I break that down in my book. So there is rule of law on the surface, but when you actually see what happens and you see how did someone like me 20 years ago as a young woman get thrown into a Chinese basement prison cell for holding the word compassion and told that's illegal? Well, because the Communist Party of China's constitution says whatever we says goes. So even though we have all these systems in place, if the CCP says, no, the word compassion in a public place is illegal, then everyone else will follow that. They will make rules. They will adjust things. They'll send you to prison. They'll hold a fake trial anyway, just to make it happen. And all other laws will disappear. I interviewed judges and lawyers to confirm all this. It's in my book. And the second misconception that I want to mention is the Chinese Communist Party is not China, and it's not the Chinese people. This is a big a big lie that's been given to the Chinese people, and it's spread into the West. We've been told to think that China could not exist without the CCP, and that they are one and the same. And that if you criticize anything the CCP does, you are called anti-China, anti-Chinese people, anti-Chinese culture, just anti-Chinese. And that's the worst thing for people who have escaped China and tried to tell their story and stand up for the Chinese people who have suffered so much, and they've been called a traitor to their own nation, a traitor to their own culture, because they were standing up for the people. So this is a big lie that we have come to believe largely in the West, that China is the CCP and cannot exist without it. But the truth is that China has a very long, ancient history, thousands of years, and they existed well before the Soviets imported communism into China, a foreign import. It's not Chinese. They've got Mao and Stalin and these, white guys with beards. They're not Chinese. So it's really not a Chinese system at all. It's just been hijacked. So those are the two things I would say we misunderstand the most.
Well, I've done a lot of research into the Bush family. I focus on the financial system and follow the money. And a lot of people don't understand that Karl Marx was a Rothschild and that he was funded by a group of what they call early 19th century progressives, or that was their later date. This was in the 1800s. But they are predominantly what's left of the Roman Empire. Communism itself is a construct of the Catholic Church, who is implementing, they did all the people they murdered in Europe to get them to consent to their system, which is about total control, where women have no rights. And that actually, a lot of times they blame the Russians, but it was the Bolsheviks, not the Russian people. The same with the Chinese. The Bolsheviks were financed by the City of London, which is a papal city, not part of England, is owned by the Vatican and New York City via Union Bank through George Bush Sr.'s father. And it's George Bush Sr.'s cousin who brought Yale in China to China and brought the concepts of communism to China. So the Russians get blamed, but it's really the banking infrastructure that's controlled us through the birth certificate. We're all slaves in their system. They've just applied different strategies. And now that people are becoming aware, they're trying to implement communism everywhere so they can kill everybody who's a thinker and leave the rest of the people struggling like they've done in China. Because the first thing they do, you and I would be the first people to get marched off to the camps. And I'm completely aware of this. And I believe we are currently at war with China, but not the Chinese people, with the structure that controls their lives. And they are going to be the ones that are going to have to push back. But that's really where my focus has been. And this is what led me to the understanding of what's really going on in China.
When I agree, when I read Anthony Sutton's book about Wall Street financing the Bolsheviks years ago, that was a real eye-opener for me, seeing the money flow, follow the money, as you said. And me, as growing up to Russian immigrant parents in Australia, when I met my husband-to-be, David, he was had Czech parents from Czechoslovakia. They had escaped the former Czechoslovakia. They saw the tanks, the Soviet tanks, roll in. His father didn't want to follow communism, but his father's father was a high-level Communist Party member. So the whole family, their lives were in jeopardy and facing imprisonment if they didn't follow the party. So they decided to escape, and they spent 6 months in a refugee camp, not knowing if they would be sent back from Yugoslavia. Luckily, they made it to Australia. So when my husband said, I don't know how I'm going to introduce you to my dad, he hates Russians because he had seen what the Russians did. But the distinction that we were able to make, and we've got a great relationship, was the Russians are not Soviets. This is the distinction, as they say, that we have to make, is that the people have had these political structures imposed upon them by a small group of elites with a lot of money backing them. So the Russian people the Russian culture that I grew up with, even in Australia, was the very traditional one. We would go to Saturday school. We would learn the old language, the old stories, go to the Russian Orthodox Church, the old way of doing things. And we had those, the wonderful hats. I don't know what they call in English. We call them kokoshniki and in Russian, and the outfits. And I would do Russian dancing and. But it was very not Soviet. The Soviet Russian, we just stayed away from because my family didn't want any part of that. So, but in society, we need to become more clear on the distinction between the people and the political systems and structure, as you say.
And I'm always sure to point that out because I do rail against a lot of different systems on my shows. But I always point out that I'm praying for all the people I'm talking about, and it's the political structure and the leadership. It's not the religion itself. It's not the people themselves. I try to have constructive conversation because we're so shut down anytime we want to seriously discuss something. But on the other hand, I'm a white woman who believes in God. People can attack me all day long. And if I say anything, then I'm privileged. So I'm tired of it. And I don't care if people think I'm thinking that, because what you have to understand is in communism, every day when Chinese children go to school, they're taught to hate white people. And we're having
Yes.
attacks all over China. They just stabbed four students. All over China, there's mass attacks for random reasons on regular people. So they are planning their systems collapsing. So they're revving up their society. Whatever happens when societies collapse, they start warring on the people around them. And I believe that's what the next intent is. And we need to understand that we are at war right now. Whether you like war or not, I'm personally opposed to war, but that's what we're doing. We're in a war. So on that note, there's a lot of independent media that's posting images of completely empty cities, recent infrastructure projects that are collapsing all over China because cheating and theft is the way people survive. And many cities have closed shops and empty factories. There's videos I've been watching where there's whole streets of people just sobbing after they lose their jobs because they have no idea what they're going to do. And so is China booming or is it going broke?
It's definitely gone broke, and it's in a very it's on a cliff, I would say. What's going to push it off the edge? I don't know. When will it fall? What will that fall look like? I don't know. I cannot predict the future there. But I've been saying this for years now. These signs have been there for years, but finally, the media is willing to. It's not that they're willing to talk about it. They have no choice now. They've had plenty of opportunity to be talking about these stories for years, but with China, when the media wants to tell a China story, they usually look to the CCP. And they say, this is the general media, mainstream media, the ones who have really got an eye on China. They know what they're doing, and you trust them to generally read between the lines and give you the true story. But for the bigger media outlets, they still are trying to get advertising dollars from China. They are still trying to sell their content into China, keep their reporters inside China. So whenever a story comes out, and there's another ghost city, there's another empty village, there's another, these people just dying on the streets, or these knife attacks, horrific, horrendous things. That's been going on for years. We're
Or
talking
them
multiple
driving
years now.
cars into crowds, into schools, because it's like they hate themselves and they hate children because children are the future. Have you heard that movement?
They call it revenge on society attacks. Yes. And so again, that started to be a real trend at least 3 years ago. But the media is only 2022. That's what I remember sort of starting to really see it escalate. But the media, when they try to report on it, they look to see what does the regime say. And the regime says, no, 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 we don't have a problem. That's just someone with a mental disease. Oh, no, that's just someone who was on drugs. No, no, nothing to see here, guys. They're just sort of putting up the blinders. But now that I think this current US administration is saying, no, we actually want the truth from China and we're going to hold people accountable, it's making the media say, oh, well, maybe we could say something about China that doesn't put the Chinese regime in a good light and it's honest, and maybe we'll get some backup because maybe these tariffs are going to make a difference. Maybe this and that. It's actually emboldened, I think, a lot of the media to actually just report the truth. Just tell the story as it is. Let the chips fall where they may. Just tell the truth to us. I think we deserve it as human beings. But they have been afraid to do that. And so these killings, these revenge on society attacks, I talk about all this in my book, and which was published a number of years ago now. Well, I put this book out first in 2020, and I bring all that in there. And I updated it with a new edition last year and brought in the revenge attacks in the last section of the book. So I did look into this in detail. They have been right on the edge of the cliff for a few years now. We're finally catching up and seeing it. To understand it, we have to look behind the headlines and open up our minds just a little bit, just enough to say that it is a different world. It is not like just traveling from California to New York and saying, wow, it's different here. It is a whole nother world with a completely different system. And that system is failing. Like it has failed everywhere that communism has tried. China lasted longer than most other places under the Communist Party. And people say, well, communism failed everywhere else. China's not communism. Look, we're doing trade with them. They must be okay. We failed. We misunderstood. We thought engagement would make them become a free democracy like us. No, didn't happen. It was a lie pushed to us in the beginning. It was never going to happen. But the communist state itself, the whole ideology is a dog-eat-dog system. And we're seeing the last stages of that in China now, I believe. And what's going to happen is it is scary. There are a lot of people that have disappeared and they're gone. And finally, we're going to start getting some truth back. And we're going to see big changes very soon, I think.
Well, and it was people like Henry Kissinger and these New World Order people who love to talk about this stuff, including starving people for consent. That's one of his favorite topics. He just wrote that book, The Post-Human World, where all the robotics and everything that were being opposed in other countries are being built in China. I think there's so much more to we have to understand that it's the people who financed the Nazis and the Bolsheviks, and those people are still in power. They still have the money, and they're bringing about this system. And you just can't get it through to people. It's so frustrating. I'm sure you've been trying longer than I have.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I like to say to people, just imagine, right? The Berlin Wall fell, but prior to that, those people had a big grip on power. They had control over a lot of systems, they'd taken over a lot of countries, and they had did a lot of testing on people. You look at what the Soviets did and how they tested in science and psychology and marketing and sales and all these different types of systems and studies that we take for granted. Oh, they've been working them very hard. I know in filmmaking, the Soviets are looked to as the first ones that really elevated film editing to another level of manipulation of human emotions and storytelling. So we're taught to, as filmmakers, we're taught to study the Soviet editing techniques to learn about good filmmaking. So it's so interesting. And I say, look, once people have that amount of power, they expanded so far. Do you really think they would just let it go that easily? That they're just going to say, okay, our decades-long plan just fell through the cracks. I'll just go and start gardening now. I'm just going to write books about it now, and I'm going to go retire and just die at the end of my life. No, these people had a very, very long-term plan. That's the key with communism. It's not a single lifetime goal. It's not a decades-long goal. It is a generational goal. That's what we've got to get into our heads. And certainly with China, their plans are 100-year plans. We hear about the 5-year plans. That's all we hear. Their plans are 100-year plans. They know they're not going to live to see the plan carried out. They are planning for the long term. And that's what communists have done even before China, all the ones, as you've mentioned. So we have to forget the short-term thinking. We are so used, we're being trained to just scroll, scroll, scroll and forget the last thing we saw. Very short-term thinking. We are being blinkered into short-term thinking. Whereas these people, sometimes I call them tyrannists, right? They kind of sit back and they've got all these strategies going on, playing chess, playing the chessboard, and they are thinking very long term, and they are very happy for us to just forget that 100 million people just got killed over there, 10 million over there, another 1,000 there. Didn't really matter, right? Just scroll, 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 and you'll be okay. So we have to open our minds to a long-term thinking, and then it's easier to understand and say, oh, they were planning long term. Okay, the Berlin Wall falling was seen as a glitch, as a short-term delay, but their planning is long. So they just changed tactics and they adjusted their plans. They always knew they had to overtake America in a different way. They could never use the same strategies that they used to take over China and Russia. They needed a different strategy for the US, which they've been enacting out through our institutions, the long march through the institutions. The long march is not a 3-day walk that we think is a long time. It is seriously a 100-year plan of really going through. And we have to start thinking more long term. And then it's easier to see these plans and realize, oh, this has actually been going on for a long time. Then you can see the signs and then you can start to piece things together. But it can be very uncomfortable for people to think that way. But once you just take that, it's really only a small shift of thinking. Once you can shift your thinking and start thinking more long term and look at other people's plans in a more long term way, then it's just easier to look at history. As you say, history is long and we can learn so much from it and have that perspective. And that's what we need to help us go forward, because we have to look forward, but we can learn from the past. Yeah.
I think what a lot of people miss about communism and the World Economic Forum and this whole worldwide movement, these bankers and really the royal families of Europe, like a lot of people don't understand that's who own the banks. Like they've been trying to put forward. And you can go back and see how in the United States, some of these things were declared outright. If you look at things like Planned Parenthood, founded by Margaret Sanger and Bill Gates' father, which a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
And one of their stated missions was not only to wipe Black people off the planet, it was to kill the Chinese population, right? They believe that Chinese people were also inferior. So I believe that this has been enacted out over a long period of time, a part of their eugenics program. And then this is kind of goes into my next. There's so many people missing in China right now. People believe that the population's really only in half. And this is this thing that I don't think a lot of people put together. The United States financed Echo Alliance. Echo Alliance was doing the COVID stuff. They shipped that virus to China, and according to Chinese own numbers, it killed 200 million people. So are you aware of that going on? And do you believe that that was an act of war by us or the deep state, more or less? Because their goal is to wipe out the Chinese people after they enslave them and collapse all the world economies by pumping slave labor products into free market economies.
I'm not familiar with Echo Alliance, so I can't speak to that. But China got hit so hard by COVID, we don't know the real numbers. You cannot trust any numbers coming out from China.
Well, the Chinese own numbers are 200 million if you use the analytics and ChatGPT and all that. The numbers themselves say 200 million, but apparently there's a big epidemic of a lot of children dying of respiratory diseases via the vaccination. Why are small children having heart attacks? That doesn't make sense. So that's
generally,
something I think.
Yeah, and generally any number that comes, any official data that comes out of China, I say at least double it.
Well, and that's what the people think, right? They say they believe there's 400 to 600 people missing, and they've done everything from, they've compared every data from how many childhood vaccinations, how many children started school, how many people are, I mean, these people have gone at it from, and these are statisticians from countries all over the world trying to focus in on what's going on there. So I pray for the regular Chinese people and just pray that this at some point is going to finally end for them. I know that Xi Jinping has been demoted publicly. A lot of people believe he's lost his power. I know he had a stroke over New Year's, and that the PLA is now in power. The top 70 military industrial complex have been removed. The leaders of companies like who made the rockets, who made their fighter planes, they've all been removed, jailed, or outright disappeared over the last few months. Do you think this is part of the collapse, or do you think that they're consolidating their power? And what does it mean for us?
Well, I think it's part of the collapse, but some of it may also be caused by not necessarily disappearances, political disappearances, but it could also be caused by this virus. And we're not being told. They are always being opaque. The CCP is opaque to itself, let alone to its people, let alone to us. And that's where we have to insist on transparency, because we just cannot trust Chinese data. You cannot trust it. Businesses have learned the hard way. They kept saying, oh, we'll go and try. Oh, look, the check they're going to give me. Oh, look at the access they're going to give me. And then every time they build their business there, then suddenly there's another business just down the street with exactly the same technology, exactly the same setup, and they put the Americans out of business. Boom, they lose, hundreds, millions, billions, whatever they lose. And then people go in again. They fall for it. And so we have to stop being useful idiots to the regime there and just saying, oh, here's the data. Oh, this guy's disappeared. Or we have to look behind the headline. So I think, yes, the regime is collapsing. It cannot sustain. About at least 5 years or so ago, there was a big trend in China, which has only escalated, where Chinese people, it was a grassroots movement. It's still happening, but now there's a lot less people. So since COVID, things have changed. But there was at least the numbers I've seen where we're talking millions of Chinese people who have actively signed and said, I am renouncing my membership in the Chinese Communist Party. So this civil disobedience movement is massive inside China. And of course, the regime has tried very hard to suppress information about it, and very few American media have reported on it. But this is a massive movement. They call it the Tuidang movement in Chinese. So all Chinese people know about this, but very few Americans really know about it. This is what's been happening on the ground. And there's a lot of talk among people in China. It's like, well, some of them call it the mark of the beast, being associated, being attached with the Chinese Communist Party. These are their words. And they're getting back to a sense of tradition where they're seeing a China before communism, whereas for the past decades, they haven't been able to see anything else because they were told China really started in 1949 when the Chinese Communist Party took over. That's when our nation was founded. But now Chinese are getting a chance to look beyond, because there's been so much civil disobedience. Groups like especially the Falun Gong practitioners that I mentioned that have been heavily persecuted, they have created one of the biggest social civil disobedience movements inside China. That's going to be documented at some point. My movie touched on a fraction of it, but that is like massive to think this country of, a billion plus people, now a lot less, have been awakening to the evils of communism by people that are saying, we're being persecuted, you're being persecuted. Look at the real history of our country. Look at the real history of the people running this country, and look at the real history of communism. They have been saying for decades now and spreading the word throughout Chinese society, saying communism is not Chinese, guys. It is not Chinese. It is a foreign import. Look at its history. Look at its history of killing, deceit, deception, big money, elites, all of that. They have been getting this out. So as much as we're seeing devastation in China, we're missing a very big part of the story, which is there are people in China who are seeing hope and they've been actively working towards it, and they're still working towards it now. It's just that the stories are very hard to get out. So I think we have to search harder for those stories. And it's hard. Like, I see so many postings of so many murders and killings and things just on the streets of China these days. It gets very depressing, that I have to search harder to find the stories of activism and courage. There are those stories still there, and that's what we're going to see come out in, I think, the near future, because the devastation is already very bad and it's starting to leak. But we're going to need to see some hope. Some people in China are starting to see some hope, but it's not that they're starting. They have been seeing hope, but we don't see that. We just see the worst of the worst. But I want to say that there is hope there, but it really is collapsing. And I think there's so much to these numbers that we're just not seeing.
Well, we had the Nazi movement where the German people lost, but the Nazi party won. They extracted all the high-level Nazis with all the rewards of the war into Western cultures, into the United States, hence communism, right? So I'm just a little concerned that I was in England a couple years ago, and they're in the city of London, which is also a papal city, not part of the United Kingdom, that funds the wars of the world. There's two massive buildings right in the financial district that are all lit up and are all cared for, but they're all empty. They're all for Chinese high-level people. And if you travel around and you keep your eyes open, you're going to start seeing these Chinese buildings. If you understand what happened in World War II, all of the Nazis were extracted by our government, by the British government, by the government's bankers who'd financed the wars. They brought them to the United States. Therefore, we've seen the implementation of socialist policies because they put them at high levels of our government, in our education system, NASA, medical industry. And for the last, I believe, since World War II, that's what's brought us to the culmination of the collapse of the Western world. And my fear is that these same people who are the corporate heads that have been in bed with the Chinese, none of them invented the technology that they're selling out to the people in China. They don't have the patents. They, again, are puppets of this system. And I believe they're going to extract the Chinese communist leaders into the United States and all the Western world and continue the collapse that we are also under for having a half free economy and a half socialist economy that's slowly been implemented. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's
a long question.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? That's one possible scenario, right? Is that the globalist elite, the communist international elite are going to try and save and rescue Xi Jinping or those that they feel are worthy of being part of their future system. In the US, we're seeing the FBI and the way they're going after Chinese nationals who are spying for the CCP now and threatening US citizens here in the US. They've never done that before. I've been trying to raise awareness about this for 20 years, more than 20 years, but only in the last few years have I seen the FBI issuing day after day another face and name and saying, we're taking down this network of hackers that have been attacking on X, for example. They just took down a whole big network of people who were specifically going after the Chinese dissidents, and especially those in the Falun Gong movement who have really been pushing to expose what they're doing and the infiltration from China. They came and they took down that whole network on X. That's never happened before. So I think we've been in a war for a long time without knowing it because the war's been waged upon us, right? But the state of the war is changing, and the current administration here in the US is throwing some curveballs to the globalists, and the Chinese Communist Party is also throwing curveballs too, because they don't always want to play the game that the globalists want to play. They are saying, well, we're communism with Chinese characteristics. We need to be the leaders. We want to be the hegemons, they call them. And so there's tension there as well. They are not just playing the yes man anymore as they did before, right? Mao Zedong was just in the early Chinese Communist Party taking the money. He carried things out to an extreme. But then, according to the Communist Party, I guess the International would kind of say he went a bit rogue. He went and became this cult figure. And then the Chinese have just taken it and expanded this communism into a whole new beast that the globalists are struggling to deal with because China is saying, oh no, we want to be the leader. And the globalists are saying, well, no, you cannot. You are under us. And the Chinese are saying, well, I don't think so. But China is losing so much power now. The officials have been for more than 5 years getting all their money out. They've been sending their kids over to America. They've been getting babies born over here. They've been buying property and residential, commercial, farmland for years now because they've seen this coming. They saw this coming 10 years ago, especially when that Tuidang movement took off. They saw we are going to fall and I will be a scapegoat if I do not get out, and if I do not get my family out. So they've just been already, mass exodus from China has already happened. Will the globalists want to save the elites in China? I don't know. Will the current administration continue to go after the Chinese nationals that they know are spies? I hope so. So there's a whole interesting international power play going on. And I think particularly these three types of, I guess, three players, right, are all shifting around. And we can only guess at what their moves are going to be. But I think we're going to start seeing things spill out into the public more.
Are you aware that since the Opium Wars, the City of London's been in charge of Chinese banks?
Um,
They have the
I'm
right to invest all the money for the Chinese CCP. They have a contract that was written. This is why I get confused. They're using the Chinese to bring about their system to eugenicize their own people. But in the long run, the bankers are the same bankers who control our country, the same bankers who control Russia, the same bankers who control Europe. So who are we fighting? And why do our leaders promote this failed system repeatedly?
Well, there's a lot of tension when you say someone owns something in China. The Chinese Communist Party still says, no, it's on our soil. I don't care what contract we have. I don't care what money you brought in. They do not have the rule of law where even Britain, I believe, can say we're going to pull our money out. They could, right? Of course the contracts are there, but contracts in China don't mean a thing.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right. So we're talking at war. They will use other things to attack China. They will use so many other ways they're going to bring down the nation if they cannot. If China cuts off control of the banking system, then the globalists will use other ways to exert pressure on China. So China is just being squeezed from all fronts. And what are they going to do? Are they going to give in to the globalists? Are they going to collapse? Are they going to give in to the Chinese people and reform or reshape? Will they try to side with, try and find allies elsewhere? I don't know. But I think anyone who thinks they've got control over China may not realize what they're dealing with inside China.
Now, I noticed that this Li family, LI, is starting to have quite a power base, and there seems to be some structure between Xi Jinping. Now, the Li family line, it's one of the 12 satanic bloodlines of Europe. The Li family is the Chinese division of that family. Now they're vying for control right now. Have you seen anything about that?
No, I haven't followed that one closely because I know Li is a very common family name in China, but you must be talking about one particular bloodline.
Well, yeah, there's a particular bloodline, the ones that are in power, I would assume, because again, the 12 bloodlines are the ones who are supporting the communists. take over the world. So I just wonder, I know there's a lot of Lees in there. I have a lot of Chinese friends with the last name Lee, but I don't think they're involved. They live in Beverly Hills in the Valley and in San Francisco. So, they were born in Canada, or, they're second and third generation now. But it's really funny because I've been watching a lot, trying to learn about Chinese culture, just not the political stuff. So I've been watching a lot of things. And it seems like the girls that I know and the women I know are more traditionally Chinese women than the women in China today, because there's, the one child policy has also created a lot of really spoiled people. The women are highly educated and there's no one for them to marry because the majority of the men aren't. There's this big marriage is such a trap. I mean, for women, not only are they expected to raise the family, they're expected to work in these incredible long hours in factories. There's a big push for children. The whole younger society doesn't want to marry. And they've got the Bailon movement, which just means like lie flat. There's all these strange things going on, and there's women crying they can't find a husband, but on the same hand, they need a husband. There's a lot of materialism. It's really weird that you wouldn't expect out of communism. It's supposed to be a community effort, but when you see the women and what they want and what the men want, and the men are saying we can't provide all, it's really so different to me, having, grown up in California. I've always had friends from the Asian areas and, from the Philippines, Vietnam. Growing up in California, it's such a mixture. What do you think about that? Do you see the fissure of the family, which really seems to be the most suffering situation besides job loss and all those other things, the destruction of love and intimacy, and like you were saying, the basis of China was the family before communism, and now your father is the state and your mother is the state.
Yeah, yeah. I go into this in my book quite a bit because it's a fundamental issue. And isn't that what Marxism originally sought to bring down, was the tradition of the family unit? The family unit is what protects us, in my experience and understanding, from the state. It's our strongest protection from complete government control. And once that gets broken down, then you're just an individual on your own. You can be controlled through your workplace because it's very easy for corporations to be controlled by the state. And then it's very easy for corporations to control individuals, like we see in China with they're working 16-hour days in a factory, they sleep in a dorm, they don't have time to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and then they go home once a year for 2 weeks for New Year's holiday, and they have to spend days just to get there and days just to get back. So they see their family once a year, and they're just working in these horrific conditions. That's what happens when your family really just gets taken away from you, and it's getting broken down more and more, where marriage, people don't want to get married, all the things you mentioned. It's getting harder and harder for people to do anything. And so there's one story in my book that I talk about. One lady who was translating for me when I was interviewing someone who was a model student for the Chinese Communist Party when he was growing up. And she comes out of during the break on the interview, she was doing simultaneous translation for me in my ear. And she said, she says, I've been outside of China for 30 years now. And I never realized until today that when I hear the word Gongchangdang, Chinese Communist Party, I feel a warmth and love in my heart, like the love for my mother. And she said, and I hate it. I hate that feeling. She said, I never realized that until today. And she says, I don't know what I'm going to do to get rid of it. But this is the kind of propaganda, the indoctrination that has happened to the current generations of Chinese. They have lived under this system for so long, which has evolved. It's not like the original Marxism. It's not like how it was under Stalin. It's not like it was under Mao. It evolves, but it's the same system. Yes, they've been allowed money and materialism. They needed something to fill the void after the Cultural Revolution. There was no more belief in God. There was no more Buddhism. There was no more Confucianism. There was no more family. They had to turn against their parents and their teachers, their grandparents, and they had to say, the CCP is my mother, the motherland is my mother, the CCP is my father. And when you say that, you feel it with love, you feel it in your heart. You had to push it in there and say, I love them, I love them, I love them. And your family was gone. If your family disappeared, it didn't matter. So they could be killed, they could be sent to labor camps, and you could be sent to a factory to work 16 hours a day for peanuts, and you'd think that's okay because you were never told that you were worth more, and that human life was valuable, and that you're a precious human being, and that you deserve to be paid fairly for your work. They were never told that. So, yeah, the family unit has pretty much been decimated already under China, under the CCP. And it's hard for us to imagine, but when people start to see it being attacked here in the US, and they say, why are kids being taken away from their parents? Why is the school taking control over my kid and not allowing me as a parent to find out what's going on, what they're being taught, things like that? Then we start to ask questions. And I say, yes, that's why I wrote my book, because we need to see China, I think, as the worst example of what could possibly happen anywhere in the world if we let it, because it's already happened there. And now we're seeing the collapse of it. I don't know how long that's going to take, but we're going to see it probably in our lifetimes. So, yeah.
So, with that in mind, why do you think so many Western leaders are promoting this failed system? Has the CCP captured foreign power structures through bribes and money, or like honeypot operations? I know that there's been a little progress, like you're talking about. So just last week, members of the EU and Belgium and Portugal were arrested, and their offices and homes were raided for taking bribes. And the charges include taking money to influence Chinese communist policies into the EU. So they want to come here and destroy our countries too?
Yeah, I mean, in America and well, around the world too, the CCP has set up Chinese police stations. For example, in New York, there was one shut down, but it was being run independently of the American system by China. And they were saying, oh, no, we need this for the Chinese people in New York. And New York saying, hang on, they're in America. And China saying, they're our people. So even if you leave China and so many people are escaping, why do you think they're all trying to get out of China? Because it really is that bad. So they're coming here, and even the CCP is saying, oh, no, you don't. We still control you in America. We still control you in Canada. We still control you in Australia, Philippines, all these places. They set up more than 190 police stations in different cities throughout the world. So, but those are slowly being shut down. There is a big battle going on, I think, between, like I mentioned, the FBI starting to say, here's agents like New York City. The chief aide for the Governor Hochul was found to be a Chinese spy. And so that finally came out, but she'd been there for a long time. I think they knew earlier. Why are people being duped into this? I think two reasons. One is, yes, money. And bribery and honeypot schemes, and they're just being easy to control. They're what generally Stalin or Lenin would call the useful idiots. Is like, okay, well, bribe them now, give them some money, give them some shiny things, and they'll say we're great, and they'll tell their friends, and we can control them, get them into bad situations, and then we'll film it so that we've got blackmail on them. They do that, and those people are easy to control. There's a lot of those people here in the US. Then there's fewer people, I believe, of those who really know what's going on. And they really have this idea that Marxism, communism is inevitable. That is a big lie. They really think that it is inevitable in whatever form it takes, and that it will somehow manifest, no matter how badly or poorly or how many people have to die. And so those sort of elite progressives, and I don't think there's that many of them that really believe that, but that is the fundamental principle of Marxism, that it is inevitable. And so it's hard to have a rational conversation with those people, because they say, doesn't matter how bad it is, this is still the best way. And you say, well, how about 45 million people killed in just this short period of time? It doesn't matter because this is still the better way. They are not willing to look at any other way. They've been so blindsided. And I think there's fewer of those people now, but there's still a lot of people that fall into that broader category of what I don't call them useful idiots. It's what the communists and what those progressives call them. They say we can just pay them, bribe them, blackmail them, and they'll do anything we want. And that's what they do.
Well, and it's frequently, like you were saying, the progressives are always talking about the freedom from slavery. They want reparations. They want all these things. Yet they're promoting an international slave system that's for Europeans is going to replace the feudal system that our ancestors left, and why they went to Australia, why people left Russia, why all these people in mass exodus, because all of the workers, all of the industrious people, all the thinkers have left under their system. So they've got to try to recapture us, because without that, the systems completely collapse. I've shared my concerns about the state of China a lot of different times. It's so nice to have you on the channel. I believe there's a mass famine coming in the next few years. And what do you think about that? Or if the famine with food prices increasing is even closer than the next few years?
Well, in China, it will depend on how much of the population is still around. That's a scary reality. The CCP has consistently been known to give its own resources to other countries and not to its own people in exchange for political gains
Yes.
internationally. So that's how, when the Great Famine happened in the 1940s, that people were dying, even though there was masses of food being going to rot in warehouses, and there was masses of food and money being sent overseas, but the Chinese people were left to die. So it does depend on how many people are around to carry that out.
Well, that's what leads me to believe that there's somebody over the Chinese CCP, because generally you don't want to kill your own people, even if you're depending on them to run a slave system. So I think that the death of the Chinese is something that's been long planned by people in Britain and some other countries too. And not the CCP, like I said, came out of the construct. How did a closed culture find out about Karl Marx in Germany? So these are all the suspicions that I have. So, anyways, this has been really awesome. I wanted to touch one thing on slave labor. So today we've got a big movement in the United States. They're debating tariffs or taxation. Which one is the right option? And what a lot of people don't understand is the United States itself, until the early 1900s, supported itself and their government via tariffs. But when the private bankers took our country over, they didn't want tariffs because they wanted, the goal of their long-term goal is to enslave us in taxation. So I don't know if there's I lost my train of thought there. So the taxation system is the one that really has the control, because if you can control the governments through taking debt that they can't afford to repay back, you eventually control the country. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think the founding fathers really understood that principle really well.
Mm.
And why did they stand up for and fight so hard to prevent the taxation over here from Great Britain? That to me just shows that our Constitution is, I like to say that America is the last stand. There is nowhere left to run. My family's escaped all these countries. There is nowhere left to run. I know that growing up in Australia, that here is the last stand for the free world, and I think we have to get back to history. We have to learn from history. We need to understand the system, how it's got to where it is, and ask the questions. And you're giving the answers here, which I love. You know, you're telling people how the system was created, where it came from, and people have to ask those questions and be willing to listen to the answers, because it's all there in black and white in history. You know, why did the founding fathers fight so hard just to prevent any form of taxation from Great Britain? And then here we're giving what, 30% or whatever, you know, income tax, and then we're complaining about tariffs. It's very easy to get distracted by news media and this short-term thinking of the scroll. We need to just get away from the scrolling, break that, start taking control of our time, and saying, no, I want to focus on this thing. I want an answer to this, and not be distracted by the next shiny little thing that goes over there and says, look at me, I'm a tariff. Don't look at your taxes. Don't look at these things. Don't look at the power. Don't follow the money. No, just take a minute to follow the money, follow your money. That's what I like to tell people. Follow your money. Remember, it's your money. Every single dollar. As I tell my kids, you want to buy that thing? Okay, well, I'm not paying for it because I don't like that company. I don't like what they stand for. If you want to do it, you pay for it, and it's your money, your choice. You vote with your dollars. And if I like the company, I'll say, great, let's buy two of them. Because I want to support that brand, I want to support that person, and I tell them why. I want to put my money in. I want to vote with my dollars. So I think we have to follow our money every step of the way and go back through history. I know it sounds big, but it doesn't have to be big. If you just cut out take out 10 minutes a day, stop scrolling, and instead follow your money. And you'll get to the bottom of the world's problems pretty quickly, and you'll be able to make a big change in your family and your community. That's what I've experienced.
Well, in tariffs, a lot of people don't understand. They're like, well, tariffs are the reason World War II started. Yeah, because the European powers wanted to blast stuff into our country and tax our stuff getting sent over there. People don't really understand tariffs right now. One of the reasons China is suffering so much is because they were sending cheap products into our market so we could all go to the 99-cent store in Walmart. And not that I haven't shopped there myself, but they were using slave labor to destroy all of our industry. And now our country is collapsing because all of our industry went to a country that was using slave labor. So tariffs are a way to stop slave labor. Buy less. You don't need that stupid plastic figurine. Buy less, keep the money in your country, and quit supporting the communists who are, the reason it's cheap is because there's no laws, there's no regulations, and these people are being used like animals till they drop dead on the factory floor. And these same people are the ones that are touting, you know, when you hear people, oh, you don't understand tariffs. I'm like, you understand tariffs? They're supporting the communist regime, although they don't understand that they are. Because the reason we have to have tariffs, especially with China, is because they're using slave labor and they're stealing the wealth of our country, not just they're stealing our jobs, but they're stealing our technology. China wouldn't have the military it had today if they hadn't stolen all of our military. I mean, it's well documented that the Clintons sold our country out in the 1990s and passed all of our military secrets to the Chinese. Not that their military equipment is working. If you watch their military and what they're doing, it's not like most of it's working. They're, of course, selling it to Iran and our enemies. But even a lot of our own equipment from our own military industrial complex is not performing the way they said it would. So we've got all these culminating things. So
yes, it's look at the state of the world. We're in a really crazy situation right now. And I'd like to remind people, it's like, okay, we imported so much from China, and we say, look at all the cheap products, look at all the students that we brought into all of our schools that have ties to the Communist Party, whether they like it or not. They are considered property of the Chinese Communist Party. They are not free agents, free students. They are agents required to report back to the CCP. So I think it's really important to remember, when we import from China, when you don't buy local, when you don't support your community, you're importing not only these cheap 99-cent products that are often poor quality, but you're importing a culture that is just full of communist culture. So we need to be able to help. The best way to support the Chinese people is actually to not import that culture, but really get back to help them break free of the Communist Party. And yes, help them get back to their culture and see that there is culture and existence of China before communism.
Well, I'm just kind of pulled up your website here. Can you just tell us the name? I'm just going to kind of scan down it so people can see your book that you've got coming up, Chinese Dragons. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my website is my name, kayrubacek.com, KAYRUBACEK.com. And my new book is the most exciting book that I have coming out at the moment because it's a full picture book. And it is a little bit different for me because usually I put out a lot of human rights, exposing really scary subjects. Some people say, oh, your books are so scary, Kay. And I say, well, this one won't scare you, I promise, though a Chinese dragon can be kind of scary. No one else has done this book before. No one's there is no art book about the Chinese dragon. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see on the screen, but it is 4000 BC to 1949. That's the subtitle for this book. So it ends when the Chinese Communist Party took over. And I have photos at the end that show the destruction that the CCP did upon all of the Chinese dragons and the culture. So the book will inspire you, your kids. It just starts from the caveman and all these amazing images. And I just found it so fascinating to hear all these ancient stories about the Chinese dragon. Chinese dragons have purple saliva. I bet you didn't know that. Anyway, that's
No,
some
I didn't
interesting,
know that.
right? There's all this interesting folklore and all these crazy stories in there that I was just so inspired by that I'd learned, and so I decided to put it together with this beautiful full color picture book. And you're looking at my book there, China, Who Are China's Walking Dead? That's my
Yes.
interviews with these former high-level CCP officials, and Finding Courage, where you can just watch, click, stream, and be inspired. I guarantee this movie will bring a few laughs, maybe some tears, but a lot of hope in the end.
And
My
how
book,
about Nowhere Left to Run?
Yes. So this was my learning from interviewing survivors of communist tyranny and the 10 steps to just to protect your mind from brainwashing. You can get that one on Amazon. It's got a lot of worksheets in there. I had so many people ask me, can you give me group discussion questions for my book club, for our church, for our group discussions? So I said, okay. So I put all the worksheets in there. You can just print it out and bring discussions about media and what's important, and strengthening your family is one of the 10 steps to survive tyranny based on all the survivors that I've interviewed. Hard
And
to
now,
believe you
what
can.
about Hard to Believe? Is that a movie or is that a
It's
movie?
a movie. Yeah, it's a movie.
Okay.
It actually screened on PBS 10 years ago. And it's about the true crime. It's a true crime story of the killing of prisoners of conscience for the sale of their organs in China.
I will put that up on the screen. I don't think we touched on organ harvesting.
Think of this story as a murder mystery. Murder seems to have been committed, perhaps tens of thousands of murders. The mystery is why so few people seem to be paying attention.
I felt this was sort of a horrible thing and nobody really wanted to look at it.
I was blood tested. Not only blood test, chest x-ray, blood pressure, an eye test, and the kidney test.
It was as if somebody was checking the health of her organs and nothing else.
Dr. Anwar, that is your job now. So as quick as possible, remove liver and the kidney.
I found the phone calls simply irresistible.
The children, I'm like, oh my God, this is real.
They killed like tens of thousands of prisoners of conscience for their organs. That's really bad. What are we doing about this?
So don't ask me how a physician can take part in this.
There are certain lines we can't cross. This is a red line. That's an absolute line.
A little bit hard to believe that it could be so.
It is not up for discussion as to whether murder for parts is taking place. It's now just a question of whether we're going to continue to put up with it.
Yeah, that's hard to believe, and that's the title, Hard to Believe. That's been
I
taking place.
I just did some reporting, the Trail of Tears in China. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Canada, they've sold a lot of the reserves and the mineral reserves over the last 20 years to the Chinese. They've literally moved their military into northern China. The government's been assisting, Trudeau has been assisting the Chinese military, teaching them how to fight in frozen warfare. And they've also sent soldiers to train. So there's a trail of tears because 2% of the Canada is still owned by the First Nations, Indigenous people, and they're disappearing all over. And what they're not reporting is not only are they stealing the unborn babies, they are organ harvesting, and it's particularly targeted at women. So it's not just in China that the Chinese are targeting. And I believe that's a lot what's gone on with a lot of the children that came across the border illegally. And I don't just believe it. I know for a fact because I've been involved in some of the different things that are going on. So,
Yeah.
well, this has been a really enlightening chat. I'm going to play some of your music at the end of the presentation. So right now, I'm just going to kind of read our follow-up. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close today?
Just keep up the good work. I think it's so important that we have these types of discussions and just let people ask questions, use your brain, think, and have these chats. I think it's really important to learn from history. So I really love what you're doing. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight, and it's so nice to talk to somebody with firsthand knowledge. I have been studying China for a long time, but only as an outsider personally. Even if I wanted to go there today after the last few years of what I've been saying about China, I'm not sure I would be safe if I ended up going.
Not yet. Wait a
I
little
lived
bit
in
of time.
communist Russia and worked directly with the communist government. And I had a business dispute, and I've already been under fear of my life before. So I'm never going to do that again. I'm just trying to help the people as much as I can, just being a digital soldier, as they say.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to, I really appreciate your dedication to exposing the punishing system that these people live under. And you've already given us your information. I'm going to put that down in the comment section so people can link into it. And as many of you can see, China and communism is not the utopia that its supporters promote. Death, famine, and slavery of the mind and body are the true outcome of this satanic structure promoted as the solution to the world's problems. So don't be fooled. That's all I'm trying to say to my listeners. As Kay just said, keep your minds and your hearts open and pray for the people who are being enslaved under this system. Please remember to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. As always, this presentation is made in hopes that never again will the truth be lost in translation. Thank you for listening. This is Kay and Simone signing off for today. Please enjoy the music for a little bit longer.